Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom, and this is a horror movie review, and I'll be reviewing Evil Dead, the 2013 remake. So, if you've seen my previous Evil Dead reviews, you'll know I'm actually a huge fan, and Evil Dead 2 is actually my favourite film of all time. So this is actually the first time I've actually seen this remake. I missed it the first time at the cinemas. I've just watched it now just for this, obviously, just because I hadn't seen it before, and obviously for this review. And I've kind of got mixed feelings with it. So if you've seen the original Evil Dead, the actual setup is fairly similar. 5 young people go to a cabin in the woods, and this time it's not just for a sort of a breakaway, it's actually to try and get one of the group, played by Jane Levy. She's a recovering drug addict, and they kind of want to get her cold turkey, and that's the reason why they're kind of going to such a remote place, so she can't really sort of go back and sort of cheat and go back in the drugs again, which I thought was a clever idea. And also she's the first one that sort of starts to sort of see things, and they don't believe her first of all, because obviously they just assume it's sort of drugs withdrawal. So that is a fairly good idea, and it's kind of a decent reason why they maybe are a bit sort of reluctant to go. They just think it's in their head first of all. Not long until these sort of demonic forces start attacking the group, and one by one they're kind of getting possessed, and in very violent and bloody ways, until there's just one survivor. If you've seen the originals, obviously you know Bruce Campbell's Ash is basically a sort of cinematic legend in regards to the sort of horror icons, as this kind of reluctant hero. Now there will be some spoilers in this review, in case you haven't realised already, because I kind of want to talk about some of the issues that I've had with it. Before this came out, there was a lot of talk about how Jane Levy is going to basically be the new Ash, and I think it was a clever idea not to have another character called Ash and essentially make him, because Bruce Campbell is one of those people that really is that's a kind of signature role for him. So I think it was the right move not to have the character Ash, and basically just have a new character, but kind of taking that toll. In the kind of the pre-release stuff, they sort of said a lot of James Levy character is basically the equivalent of Ash. I kind of disagree with that, to be honest with you, because she is ultimately the one who gets possessed the most throughout the film, and she's kind of a bad guy. She's kind of a demonic force until probably the last 15 minutes of this film, and then she kind of really only starts to sort of to do anything proactive probably literally within the last 10 minutes. So I really don't see her as the kind of the protagonist in this film. Her brother is, to a point, probably a little bit more like that, but him himself has his own problems. He's a little bit clueless. Now let's talk about it, because I'm going to be talking about kind of the original as well throughout this review. So obviously the original film was a shoestring budget, and it was really guerrilla filmmaking at its kind of finest, and it had a certain charm to it. Now I never judge film based on their budget ultimately. I always think, is this the best they can do with this particular budget in mind? Now this obviously remake is a significantly higher budget, and some things I think it does fairly well. Like I said, I think it has a couple of good ideas in there, and also obviously it's very inventive with some of the sort of the gore effects and the sort of the practical effects in regarding the sort of quite gruesome and horrible things that actually happen to the cast of this film. But I also think it has issues that are far worse than the original. So first of all, in regards to that, the actual characters are pretty much unlikable. I don't think there's a very much characterization at all on pretty much any of them, to be fair. You'll get the kind of main two, the sort of brother and sister, get a little bit more characterization than anyone else. But to be honest with you, the rest of the people, especially the 2 other females in there, they're literally got cannon fodder just sort of tattooed across their head. I guess one of the issues I have with this is some of the sort of internal logic here. Now this film was a little bit more specific in how it sort of sets up the demonic rules, if you like. Now I have a prologue in this one, which you kind of didn't have in the original film. Obviously, we've got one of the guys stupidly reading the book ultimately, which causes these demonic forces. But in doing so, he actually tells us some sort of rules. And within those rules, we're told that the demonic force needs 5 souls. Okay. However, I don't think the filmmakers can count. We actually see four people possessed, and one of them doesn't, it comes back almost. So and I'm assuming she's still got her soul, and that leaves 3. And we're told when these demonic forces have 5 souls, this kind of like abomination will rise. Now I'm assuming when they say it needs 5 souls, it means it has to possess and ultimately kill these souls. Otherwise, as soon as 5 people are died from natural causes, it can rise. So I mean, we have to assume with the information that we're given that this evil force has to physically possess 5 souls, and then obviously keep their souls in order for this abomination to rise. So we see obviously the 2 other females get possessed ultimately. Jane Levy's character gets possessed, but I'll come on to this, another issue I have with that. She kind of gets brought back. So, and I'm assuming she's coming back with her soul, so don't count her. One of the male characters gets possessed. The brother gets blown up in an explosion. He's never possessed in the film. So I mean he's died from something other than being possessed. The demon can't have his soul, otherwise if someone gets blown up or has a car accident, just completely unrelated, surely then they could get the souls. You see what I mean? I also have an issue with, and I could be wrong about this because I've only actually seen the film once, but we see from the 3 female characters, they actually kind of get infected through physical means. So the first character has the infamous tree rape scene, and the other characters kind of get bitten or stuff like that. And ultimately, I'm assuming that's what actually causes this almost like this almost like a virus to a certain degree, and it causes that possession to spread like that. I'm assuming it just can't possess people just because it feels like it. It has to have some kind of physical transference. However, the other main character, I don't know, I can't remember the character's guy, the long hair and the glasses. We see him possessed at the end, but as far as I'm aware, all the injuries he sustains are actually with objects like crowbars and nail guns and things like that. I don't ever remember him actually getting like a wound from one of the other possessed people directly. It's always been through him getting hit with something else. So whilst everyone else seems to have some kind of physical interaction with a possessed person, as in they're touching all this, some kind of like bodily fluid transfer and stuff like that, whilst this guy gets possessed by basically getting, ultimately he dies from a stab wound with a Stanley knife in the end. So I think it kind of sets up these rules and then kind of disobeys them. So it really kind of bugged me. And in certain films it wouldn't necessarily annoy me so much, but this film takes itself so seriously that you can't help but think these logical issues. Now you kind of, if a film was maybe a bit more sort of joking, a bit light-hearted, like the original Evil Dead films, and a lot of people say, oh, the original Evil Dead is a straight horror film. Yes, it was, but I think it still had an element of fun in it, to be honest with you. Yes, Evil Dead 2 was a lot more jokey, and I've seen these films countless times, and people say, yeah, it's a straight horror film. Yeah, Evil Dead 1 was a straight horror film, but I still think it had a little bit of a, not exactly a comedy vibe, but a bit more of a campy, winking at the audience type vibe to it. So, but this film has taken itself really seriously, so I can't let some of these sort of logic things go, to be honest with you, because where it's a relatively simple setup, it annoys me that they've kind of got these sort of things wrong. Another thing that bugged me, you might sound like I'm nitpicking here, so Jane Levy's character basically, she's the one that's possessed the most. She gets a lot of physical damage to her. She's hit over the head, various objects, falls downstairs. She cuts her sort of tongue in two, and yet when she gets her soul back, she is completely healed. Now I can understand some of the sort of the lesions that you might get and things like that, almost if you're kind of getting possessed. Obviously we're talking hypothetically here. Some of the sort of the kind of more physical attributes that you might suspect with like a possession. If you look at the Evil Dead films, when Ash gets possessed and I think the second one, but he doesn't, when he goes back to normal, but he doesn't heal from wounds that he sustained through physical means, like if you had your tongue cut by this saw thing, surely that's not going to heal because it's not something that was caused by supernatural means, even though obviously it's just, it's a possessed person doing it. It was still a mechanical object that did it. I don't understand why she's healed that way. And the actual process I thought was they kind of added this thing. So in the original Evil Dead, chop up the bodies basically and fire kill them. Here they've kind of got a third way to sort of get rid of them, and that's a live burial. With all the stuff that's happened to her, I don't see how really she could have survived that, especially with the fact that she's kind of got this bag over her head for quite a long time when she's possessed ultimately. And then she kind of survives out of it. Oh, I don't know. There was a lot of logical issues for me in this film. Now, it might seem like I'm nitpicking, as I say. There were some good things here. I did enjoy it, like I say. So the practical effects, I think, were very inventive. I'm being a bit harsh on this one because I'm such a fan of the original Evil Dead, and I think maybe that's some of the criticism. So for a horror film, just generally, it was okay, but I don't think it was anything special. I personally feel this is probably like an average horror film, if you can kind of get my meaning. It's a shame. I think it was a little bit of a wasted opportunity for like an Evil Dead remake. Unfortunately, I think they kind of missed the boat on some of the sort of things here. I think some of this stuff seems a bit lazy filmmaking, I have to be honest with you. I know the director's relatively inexperienced, but you know, maybe it would have been better, more in the sort of tone of the kind of the original films. Who knows? Anyway, so I'm just going to give this one a 5 out of 10. There's plenty of like blood in it, not necessarily gore, but blood. There's quite a lot of jump moments, and there are some good effects here. And I think the camera work is very reminiscent of, obviously, he's trying to kind of ape a lot of the sort of camera tricks set by Sam Raimi. There's quite a lot of visual nods to the original trilogy. I have to say, I wasn't a huge fan of the music either. Just an average horror film. A disappointing Evil Dead remake, I have to say. Maybe we'll see if they remake Evil Dead 2. Who knows? One last thing, I got to say. One last thing. The abomination. So we're told this abomination is going to come out of the ground basically when it gets 5 souls, and of course it does, even though it doesn't actually have 5 souls. And it's just another girl who seems to be possessed. How disappointing was that? Ugh. There you go. And she was kind of dispatched fairly easily. Probably dispatched quite a lot more easy than the others possessed people. Anyway, disappointing. There you go. What can we do, eh? Hopefully there'll be another one. Anyway, 5 out of 10. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Bye for now.